G'day coaches, the Draft Monster here, charging at you with some AFL fantasy content for 2023. Today it's all about the big men of the game, the monsters in the middle, the guys tapping it down so that we can stay on top, the Rucks. When looking at Rucks for my draft, I like to look at three main categories: work rate, opportunity and durability. Today I'm counting down my top 10 big boys for the year, and I reckon the most unique position in the game is about to get a whole lot weirder for 2023, so without further ado, let's talk some fantasy footy. Starting us off is Port Adelaide ruckman Scott Lycett. After getting injured early and only playing 4 games in 2022 at an average of 72, Lycett could be a more than serviceable sleeper option in your draft leagues. Since Paddy Ryder left the Power at the end of 2019, Lycett has been the number 1 ruckman at Port Adelaide. He holds his own against any other ruckman in the comp, averaging around 25 hitouts and 14 disposals per game, and hitting an average of 85 plus between the years of 2019 and 2021. So a pretty decent work rate since he shifted clubs. I'd say about a 7 out of 10. As far as opportunities go, there really aren't any other proven AFL ruckman knocking on the door at Port Adelaide, the next in line being Sam Hayes with 7 games next to his name. In Lycett's absence last year, Port Adelaide did turn to their tall forwards to bulk most of the ruck responsibilities, so I'm pretty sure Lycett coming back is going to be great for the team, and he'll spend a lot of the time just being around the ball and in the ruck contests. So a massive opportunity for Lycett this year. I'll say about a 9 out of 10 for that. And finally, it has to be said that Lycett has not played a full 22 game season since moving over from West Coast Eagles. Last year was his worst in a while after he suffered that season-ending shoulder injury, so there is definitely that risk element about him, and I have to give him a low durability score of 5 out of 10 for an overall ruck rating of 21. So you can't exactly say that Lycett is a premium ruck, but he is a more than capable ruckman based on his scoring. It would be great to see him keep getting more games into him this year, and I reckon he can get around that 85 average mark. At number 9, I have the adaptable big cat Mark Blicavs, who has the ultra-rare dual position status of ruck midfielder this season. In the premiership year, one could say Blicavs was the biggest game changer for Geelong. He had a fantastic work rate, upping his disposals, hitouts and tackles considerably, and really just going anywhere Chris Scott needed him to go, and he did it right. He is nothing like your traditional style of ruckman, more of a utility, midfielder defender who is versatile enough to get stints in the ruck. So the work rate is obvious, but I'd say that versatility is a little bit of a double-edged sword in the sense that he can go anywhere, and he kind of just sometimes gets those 1% plays like spoils and other team-friendly plays that don't actually translate to fantasy points all the time. So for work rate, I'd have to give him a 6 in that department. The Cats have never really been a fantasy scoring team in the ruck department for a while. You've got Reece Stanley, who's been in and out of the team, and when he plays he gets the CBAs and the hitouts. You've got tall forwards like Tommy Hawkins and maybe Asava Radaglia who have flown through the ruck in recent years. They just don't have the fantasy numbers like normal big ruck teams do. So again, Blicavs plays a whole bunch of other roles where he's needed, and that is pretty hard to determine how consistent he's going to be. Does he play on ball one week? Will Chris Scott chuck him down the back the next? The opportunities are hard to see. So I'm being cautious with opportunity there with a score of 6 out of 10. But without a doubt, the best part of Blicavs' game is his durability. He will play close to every single game this year because that's what he's done pretty much every season for the past 10 years. In that time, he's played 227 games, and that's an average of over 22 games a year. Stupid levels of long-term durability for a big man, and he gets a 10 out of 10 in that category for me. So an overall ruck rating of 22 out of 30 for Blix. I think that unique DPP definitely gives him an edge, and if you see him on the board late in your drafts, I would be grabbing him, thinking he will have another reasonable year and go at 86. At number 8, I have the Freo behemoth Sean Darcy. Since taking the main ruck duties, Sean Darcy has become a genuine fantasy option over the past couple of years, with averages of 93.9 and 85.8. He has always been a beast in the hit-out column. He gets the CBAs, but he has really stepped up his disposal, mark and tackle numbers in that time as well, really adding a lot more to his game. So the work rate is definitely there for Darcy. I'd like to see him do a little bit more this year. For the time being, I'm just going to be giving him an 8 out of 10 for that. His opportunities have taken a weird turn in the post-Sandilands era, edging out young Lloyd Meek for the ruck role, he's now off to the Hawthorn Hawks, and sharing a little bit of the ruck with Rory Lobb, who is now off to the Bulldogs. But now we have Luke Jackson coming on over from the Melbourne Demons, who's obviously been the backup for Max Gawn the last couple of years, so I could definitely see him making a bit more of an impact in the middle at Freo than the last couple of ruckmen have. And for that reason, I say Darcy will generally have less opportunities this year, and I reckon he gets a score of 7 out of 10 in that category. And finally, it has to be said that Darcy's durability in the recent years has been pretty decent, playing 42 games in that time, including 2 finals appearances. So yeah, really not too bad in that category either, no major injuries or anything. I'll have to give him an 8 out of 10 in that category. So that gives Big Sean Darcy an overall ruck rating of 23 out of 30 in my mind, one of the trickiest to predict this year, but I reckon he does go around that 89 average mark, and he is a fantastic pick late in your drafts. The post-Grundy era has officially begun, and Darcy Cameron will be the new main man in the middle for the long term at the Collingwood Magpies. He has been waiting in the wings for a while, but after the Grundy injury in round 6 last year, D-Cam lit it up and showed us that he is a serious fantasy star for the future. After that Grundy injury, Cameron averaged 92.5 between rounds 7 and 23, turning up 6 times and only going below a score of 83 3 times. A couple of dismal scores to tarnish an otherwise fantastic first unofficial year at the ruck helm. He has proven he's keen and has the work rate to compete at the AFL level, so I think I'm going to give him a score of 8 out of 10 in that category. With Grundy off to the Demons, D-Cam obviously has the number 1 ruck spot locked down, but as well as this, the Pies have a new couple of tall options in the forward line, with Dan McStay now joining Mason Cox, and I reckon that means D-Cam will be roving around the ball a lot more often. So the opportunities are there, and I could see him grabbing them with both hands this year with a score of 9 in that category. And then the durability aspect of Cameron's game is very interesting. He's 27 years old and about to start his 4th proper year in the AFL, so he is inexperienced, but his body is primed. Ever since he started getting games, he has played most of them. A couple of injuries early on in his career, but in recent times he has been churning away. So as far as durability goes, pretty darn good. And I'm thinking I'm going to give him about a score of 8 for that category, for a full-on ruck rating of 25 out of 30. That extra forward status should be making him a fantastic option later in your draft, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone in your league jumps on him early. Expecting him to crack the 90 barrier with an average of 93 this year. At my 6th best ruckman for the upcoming season, I have St Kilda utility Rowan Marshall. The hype train has already left the station for a lot of Marshall fans this year. The Big Saint has been widely tipped to take his game to another level in 2023 after the retirement of fellow ruckman Paddy Ryder. Personally, I am cautious of hype trains, but Marshall was on fire toward the end of last year, hitting the 100 mark 7 times in the last 9 games of the season, which did include a couple of massive scores of 133 and 163. Albeit it was a massive step up from his first half of the year, where he averaged 77.8 from the first 12 rounds, and he did scrap in a season-low score of 47 to wrap up the year. Gross. Marshall prides himself on being able to get open and take a solid mark, and he has a fantastic kick-to-handball ratio for a ruckman as well, generally sporting about 2 kicks per handball throughout his career. So the work rate is definitely there, but I also feel like Marshall can go missing at times throughout the contest, so I have to give him a score of 8 in that category. It is also well known that Marshall does not score nearly as well in fantasy when he has a fellow ruckman helping him out, and although many believe it is finally Rowan's time to shine this year, there is still that danger of forgotten mature-aged recruit Tom Campbell, who was a part of the team when Marshall brought in his lowest score of the season last year. So as much as I want to see Marshall take the reins this year, I am also exercising a slight bit of caution with a 9 out of 10 in regards to opportunity. And finally, Marshall has managed to stay pretty fit over the past few seasons, managing 21 games last year in particular, with a time on ground of about 83% per game. So that is getting pretty close to elite levels right there, and I am going to give him a score of 8 for durability, and a total ruck rating of 25 out of 30. So on the whole, I do reckon Rowan Marshall will be a great ruck option this year, but there is that element of risk of an emerging ruck coming in, and not to mention a brand new coach coming in this year as well. So again, I am exercising caution, but I do think Marshall will hit around the 94 mark this season. Now then, here we go with one of the weirdest ruck duos of 2023, Brodie Grundy and Max Gawn. The two pigs of the competition are now working together, and I honestly can't split the two, nor can I in good conscience put either of them in the top 3 rucks for the year ahead. It feels super strange to have either of them this low down in the list, let alone both of them, but hear me out. Let's start with work rate. Obviously, Grun's Sauce has been an official pig of the competition for a long time, and Gawn is an absolute gun as well, producing some insane numbers over the last couple of years. They are both versatile in different ways. Grundy is essentially a gigantic midfielder, and I think he will edge out Gawn for CBAs this year, and Gawn has a great ability to make a difference in the forward line and down back in defense. Both are monsters of the game and work as hard as any other ruck in the competition, so I have to give them both 10s for work rate. The opportunities for Grundy and Gawn is where I start to get scared, and it is purely mathematical. I am so scared that a pig ruck of our game has joined forces with literally the only other pig-worthy ruck in the AFL for the past 5 years. These two are going to be vacuuming points off each other at different stages throughout the 2023 season. For instance, in 2021, when Gawn and Grundy played 20 games or more each, they both averaged 32 hitouts a game. The Demons were 9th in average hitouts per game in 2022 with 37.5. So, maths there, even if Grundy and Gawn split the hitouts 75-25, I don't see either of them getting 30 hitouts a game in 2023, which is just a complete abnormality for either of them. So that's just a massive drop off in points right there. Factor in the splitting in CBAs, and you've got to assume both will suffer in the tackle and disposal count as well. Neither of these guys have ever had another ruckman of similar caliber by their side, and they're not even competing for the number 1 ruck spot. They're both going to be playing together every single game. So the opportunities for both Grundy and Gawn are a bit drier than previous years, and I reckon they will eat at each other just a little bit. But I could see Gawn gaining forward status throughout the season, so keep an eye out for that. But between them, I think they both get a similar opportunity to start the season around a rating of 6 out of 10. And finally, both Grundy and Gawn have both succumbed to injuries in recent time. Grundy, of course, coming back from a season-ending ankle injury last year, but so far he is looking good in the preseason. And Gawn missing a couple of games in the last few years, and as of making this video, I think he's got a bit of a hammy injury as well, so we're waiting to see how that goes. So both are proven performers, but I just can't give either of them a durability score of 10 out of 10 coming into the new season. They're still primos with scores of 9 apiece though. And overall they both get a ruck rating of 25 out of 30. Once again, super strange having either of these guys outside the top 3 rucks, let alone both of them, but I genuinely don't see either of them being up there this year. Good luck splitting the two of them though. Perhaps an unpopular opinion, but I just don't see Grundy or Gawn getting higher than an average of 95 this year. Riley O'Brien comes in as my third best ruck for the 2023 season. The big man from the Crows ended up being a top 3 ruckman again last year in 2022, averaging 93.3 from 20 games. It was another season of ups and downs, with O'Brien turning up 8 times with a ceiling of 159, but also going under a score of 88 times as well, with a floor score of 56. That 103 difference between best and worst scores is a little bit of a red flag, and enough to make me think that he just doesn't quite have that same kind of workload mentality as some of the other rucks might do on this list. Albeit he is a monster in the ruck contest, amassing a career-high average hitouts per game last year of 37, and he was also the second highest total hitouts in the year, just behind Jared Witts. But what he lacks is just that kind of disposal numbers that other rucks manage to reach. And I think that's the one thing stopping him from really reaching that next level. And for that reason, I say Riley O'Brien is just about an 8 out of 10 in the workload category. Having said that, O'Brien makes up for his fluctuant scoring by being the most experienced ruck option at Adelaide, as there is really no competition for the number 1 ruck role. With a time on ground percentage of 88 last year, I'm expecting to see him in almost every centre bounce once again in 2023. So the opportunities are well and truly there for O'Brien again this year, and the sky is the limit with a 10 out of 10 for opportunity. As well as this, even with the slightly unorthodox style that Rob has, he has managed to stay on the park a lot over the past 4 years, only missing 6 games in that time. As far as rucks go, I'd have to put that in the elite category for durability and give him a score of 9 out of 10 for a total ruck ranking of 27 out of 30. So on the whole, I reckon Riley O'Brien could have another stellar year ahead of him. Although he is pretty hot and cold sometimes, he has proven to be one of the most reliable ruck options in the game, and with a little extra output he could easily be a top 3 ruck again this year. I reckon he gets close to the triple digits, but I'm thinking just off that at an average of 97. For my second best ruck of the year, I have Gold Coast Suns co-captain and all-round unit, Jared Witts. Putting his previous year's season-ending ACL injury behind him, Witts showed us all once again why he's a force to be reckoned with in the AFL. Averaging 90.5 from all 22 games, he started slow but then came into his own, going above a score of 97 on 11 different occasions with a high score of 122. He had the most hitouts in the AFL last year with 833 and the highest average hitouts per game with 37.9, and his clearance work was unmatched. There simply wasn't a more intimidating ruckman in the contest last year, and for that reason alone, I'm giving him a solid 9 out of 10 for work rate. As far as opportunities go, Witts is a 10 out of 10. Without a doubt, he is the man tapping it down all season long for the Suns. He will be in almost every single centre bounce or boundary throw-in this season, and is going to be trying his best to lead his team to a maiden finals campaign. Apart from his ACL injury, which ruined his season 2 years ago, Witts has only missed 4 games since joining the Suns, all of which were way back in 2017. He showed us last year that he was back to business, but I'm going to give him a cautionary 9 out of 10 for durability, rounding out an overall ruck rating of 28 out of 30. Witts, in my opinion, is the most underrated ruckman in the league, part because he plays for the Gold Coast, and part because he's been overshadowed by the emergence of the super ruck variants like Gawn and Grundy of years past, or the promise of up-and-coming ruckmen like Tim English or Sean Darcy, or he also did miss a year. But it wasn't even that long ago in 2019, just before COVID ruined the norm, that Jared Witts was the third best ruckman in the competition. In that year, he averaged 104.4 fantasy points and a stupid 45.7 hitouts per game. Mammoth numbers from a mammoth man, and I reckon with a decent preseason, Jared Witts definitely can take that step back towards triple digit numbers this year with an average of 98. Before I unveil my number one pick, here are a few honourable mentions. Nank the Tank has the number one ruck role all to himself for the Tigers in my opinion. I think he's proven, he has a decent work rate, even though he does give away a few free kicks, and last year he finally put together a full season, so could be in the top 10 rucks, but I reckon he is just off with an average of 84. After being the hype train of 2022, many coaches will be hesitant to get on board again with Braden Preuss, only managing 10 games last year, which was a personal best. Preuss has a lot of potential and has shown glimpses of greatness, but what he's mainly shown us is that he is made of glass. Thinking he averages 83, but see if he can play more than half a season. And finally, the new boy in purple could just make more waves in Fremantle's ruck department than he ever could at the Demons. Jackson will get more of a go at Freo behind Darcy than he ever did at the Demons with Gawn. Can he take the next step up with 47 games under his belt in just his fourth season? I reckon he could get into the low 80s with maybe an 82, and he might even get his forward status back. And now, my number one AFL Fantasy Ruckman for the 2023 season, Lloyd Meek. No, not really, but watch this space. No, the big pasty Western Bulldog Ruckman Tim English is my number one pick of the Rucks for the 2023 season. Although he has been stripped of his forward status, Tim English still poses as the most relevant fantasy ruckman in the league. He has that pig potential, hitting the 100 plus mark 10 times last year from his 15 games with a top score of 138. Absolutely motoring along at an average of 112 from his first 7 games last year. In that time he had some massive performances, dominating in the ruck contests, not going below 20 disposals per game, and averaging 6 marks per game as well. I feel like English is the most well-rounded ruckman in the game, and I'm straight up giving him a work rate score of 10. He ticks all the boxes: possessions, hitouts, marks and tackles. If he lacks in one category, he can make up for it in another. As far as opportunities go, English should be a full-time roving ruck in 2023, and I'm giving him another score of 10 out of 10 for opportunity. In the past, he has been used a bit in the forward 50 as an extra goal-kicking forward, but now with the Bulldogs acquiring Rory Lobb in the off-season, that tall forward role next to Aaron Norton is pretty much covered. There is the question whether or not Lobb will end up taking some of English's CBAs, and that might happen a little bit, but I think Lobb will mainly be focusing on being that extra big goal-kicking forward. The one area I feel English needs to prove himself just a little bit more is his durability. So far in his career, he has never been able to string together a full 22-game season, constantly brought down by injuries and unlucky concussion protocols. But for that reason, I was gonna give him a pretty low durability score, but he is still young, and he has definitely stacked on a bunch of muscle in the off-season. So I reckon he'll be ready for a long haul this year, and I'm giving English a durability score of 8, for a total ruck score of 28 out of 30. A great work rate and a massive opportunity to be the main ruckman of the AFL, and I think he will play a lot more games this year. So book Tim English in for a big one. He'll be the only ruck to average over 100 this year, and I think he gets 103. And that is the Rucks done and dusted for 2023. Once again, I believe the Rucks to be the most unique position in the game. Some flourish and some fall, and it'll be interesting to see just how this next season unfolds for the big men. Let me know if you agreed or didn't agree with my picks in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe and follow me on Twitter at DraftMonster for more AFL fantasy content. Cheers!